morning, everyone. I'm Shen, and I am a volunteer for Saliksik. Welcome to the launch of SalikSPEAK, where we have the opportunity to interact and connect with the international research community.
Hi everyone, I'm Ken, and we will be your hosts for this morning. So this webinar is brought to you by Saliksik. Saliksik is the Philippines' first crowdsourcing platform for Filipino research. The team aims to promote the importance of research in the development of our country, to humanize and deconstruct the towering image we might have of our local researchers, as well as to inspire aspiring researchers to pursue their field of research to help create a better Philippines. So good morning, everyone. Shen, how are you feeling this morning?
I'm very excited. I think this topic, creative inquiry, is a great way to kick off SalikSPEAK, right? We've met our speaker a few times, and I really enjoyed all his stories and sharings. So I can't wait for the audience to hear more from him. Since this is
Yeah.
our first, I think the audience would have a lot in store to interact. And so if you have questions, please feel free to post them at Slido using the code hashtag SalikSpeak. We'll be reading them out later during the open discussion, and we'd also love to hear what you like most about the talk, how can apply these concepts in the Philippines.
Yeah. For our very first SalikSpeak, we have with us Khanjhan Mehta, the Vice Provost for Creative Inquiry and the Director of the Mountain Top Initiative. So Khanjhan is the prime instigator for four signature academic programs: the Mountain Top Summer Experience, the Global Social Impact Fellowship, the Lehigh Valley Social Impact Fellowship, and the upcoming Campus Sustainable Impact Fellowship, among others. These aim to engage faculty and students in multi-year impact-focused ventures. Across these programs, Khanjan expects students to take radical ownership in their projects and envisions faculty mentors as partners and co-creators, striving to propel their projects forward on the journey towards tangible, sustainable impact. Impact that concurrently builds the skill sets, mindsets, and portfolios of pioneers and changemakers in the rapidly changing world. In a previous avatar, Khanjan was the founding director of the Humanitarian Engineering and Social Entrepreneurship program, assistant professor of engineering design, and affiliate professor of international affairs at Penn State. He has led technology-based social ventures in Kenya, Tanzania, India, Cambodia, Sierra Leone, Philippines, Mozambique, and several other countries. These ventures range from telemedicine systems and diagnostic devices to affordable greenhouses, mushroom production systems, and knowledge sharing platforms for self-employed women. Over the last decade, these social ventures have directly impacted the lives of over 3 million people across 20 plus countries. So let us all welcome in our SalikSpeak stage, Khanjhan Mehta.
Hello, good morning, everybody.
Hi,
Really
Khanjhan.
nice to be here.
Yes, we can hear you. Good morning, Kanjan. So to start off, could you tell us a little more about yourself or what led you to this kind of endeavor?
Sure. So I'm an electrical engineer by training. I grew up in India, did my undergraduate education in India, and then I came to the United States to pursue the American dream. I did my graduate education here, and I've since been in academia, first at Penn State and now at Lehigh University. So I'm a non-traditional academic, and um, I firmly believe that we should be engaging students in problems that truly matter instead of focusing on content, instead of focusing on teaching them skills that are going to be obsolete the day they graduate. We should be focusing on sparking the fire to challenging them to pursue problems that they truly deeply care about and find sustainable solutions to those problems. That's a little bit about my background and my way of thinking.
Yeah. Currently, you're the Vice Provost for Creative Inquiry and Director of the Mountaintop Initiative in Lehigh University. So, what do you do? What are your functions and duties as the Vice Provost?
So, as the Vice Provost for Creative Inquiry, I write a lot of emails every single day. But if I practically zoom out, I'd say that this is an inaugural position. I've been at the LIHA about 3.5 years, and I'm very fortunate that the president and provost of the university gave me a carte blanche and challenged me to define creative inquiry in my own way, which we did. And now I run about 8 to 10 different programs that are focused on developing the skill sets, mindsets, and portfolios of students so that they can go out and change the world. So across all the programs we run, we have three goals. They are impact, impact, and impact. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So I guess we won't keep the audience waiting. So we now give you the floor for your discussion. So let's all welcome Khanjan Mehta.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Shen. So I'm going to turn on my slides now, and I believe that now I have about 30 minutes for a talk, and then we can go into a discussion for as long as you like. So here's what we're going to do. Over the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about the principles and hallmarks of creative inquiry. In particular, I'm going to talk about three sets of things. I'm going to speak a little bit about how higher education is changing and why it's changing and how we need and how we can accelerate these changes. I'm going to talk a little bit about what creative inquiry is. I'm going to mention some of the projects that we are working on to give you examples of how creative inquiry comes to life through some of our programs. And finally, I'm going to share what we consider are the hallmarks of creative inquiry. And these are very practical things that I would hope that you would be able to take away from this talk, or at least it would spark discussion. So, as I said earlier, everything I do, we have three goals. It's about impact, impact, and impact. I believe that as a university, our job is to help students find their place in the universe, to help students find what it is that they are truly passionate about and connect those passions with real world challenges so they can go out and change the world. So impact is as about improving human condition as it is about finding their ikigai, finding this intersection between what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. In other words, finding this intersection between your passion, mission, vocation, and profession. And we believe that students can find their reason for being, find their ikigai by working on truly authentic projects. So with that backdrop, let's get to our first topic, and that's about how higher education is changing. So there are a number of things that are going on in the world. The COVID pandemic is just, one example, and a really cruel example of how the world is becoming increasingly vulnerable, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous. So in my circle, we talk quite a bit about a VUCA world, a vulnerable, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous world. But putting those kinds of things aside, here are three assumptions that have driven higher education over the last few decades. The first is this idea that someone needs to teach for someone else to learn. And so we've always thought of the professor as a sage on the stage that imparts wisdom to all these students who are going to be the passive recipients of that knowledge. And this is, by the way, a beautiful book that I would recommend. It's called A New Culture of Learning. It's a really thin book. You can read it in an afternoon, and it's absolutely transformative because it talks about why we need to pivot from a culture of teaching to a culture of learning. And the reason for that is very simple. I'd like to think that most of you here are familiar with Khan Academy and Coursera and Udacity. Some of you have heard of the peer-to-peer university, or 42, which is a tuition-free coding university with two branches in France and California. And what's really cool about these universities is that they don't have any professors. It's all based on peer-to-peer learning. So here I'm not arguing that we don't need professors, but I'm arguing that we need to focus less on teaching, less on teaching and more on learning. And we need to think of the professor as the guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage. The second assumption is this idea that universities prepare students for industry. And that's true. A lot of students that graduate from our universities will end up working in traditional for-profit organizations. But I spent 3 years studying non-traditional career pathways of students, professionals that now work in all kinds of organizations focused on social impact. And I put together a book called Solving Problems That Matter and Getting Paid for It. And I learned a number of things over the 3 years of working on this project. But one of my biggest aha moments was this idea that our students are not just going to go into large corporations. Our students are going to go work in academia, various kinds of nonprofits, multilateral organizations, the government, startups, consulting organizations, and the rising fourth sector. The fourth sector refers to all the kinds of organizations that exist at this intersection between for-profits and non-profits. But they exist for social good, and that's what brings them together. So let's think about something else. If you think about your parents' generation or grandparents' generation, like my dad has had probably 3 or 4 jobs over his 40 years of working life. The average graduate now is going to have between 12 and 15 different jobs over their 40 years of working life. And these jobs will be very different. The kinds of problems they will be expected to solve will be very different. And so our job is not to prepare students for that first job, but to prepare them for these distinct jobs they're going to have over their 40 years. One more thing, the rise of the gig economy. So last year, 42 million Americans participated in the gig economy. So this is whether you give out a room on Airbnb, or you ride an Uber, or you go on Otis, and you do a freelance job as a graphic designer, right? You're participating in the gig economy. That number is expected to rise to 65 million by this year. So 1 in 3 Americans is going to participate in the gig economy. And this is not just about the US, but we're seeing similar numbers all over the world. So what does that mean? That brings me to my third and the most controversial assumption, which is this idea that you need to know the basics to do more advanced work. And so our education system is set up in an incredibly incremental fashion where you study one course after another, after another, after another, with the idea that someday you will apply this knowledge to solve a problem. But this model is fundamentally we can absorb knowledge, just can't keep up with the phenomenal rate at which we are creating new knowledge. So what's more important then is not the consumption of a finite amount of knowledge, but learning how to learn. So what if alongside teaching students specific skill sets, we instead of going or alongside going bottom up and learning content, we also challenge them to go top down and start with large problems around them, whether it's food security or healthcare issues or human rights and democracy issues or whatever it is. But we challenge students to identify the kinds of problems that they truly deeply care about, and we challenge them to go out and learn everything there is to learn about that problem. Talk to people who know more than them. Find other students, find other professionals that care just as much about their problem and want to make change. And if they keep going on this track, at some point they will reach a point of optimal ignorance and intellectual maturity where they are ready to contribute to a solution. So that's the way we operate a number of our programs. And this might sound a little vague, but I'll give you some examples of it very, very soon. But to zoom out a little bit, the basic idea here is that we should not be focusing on a certain number of skill sets, but we need to help our students develop a balance of skill sets, mindsets, and portfolios. And mindsets are about believing and thinking. Skill sets are specific things that you learn and skills you develop. And the skill sets and mindsets come to life through your portfolios. The proof is in the pudding. So your portfolios demonstrate what it is that you have done and you're capable of doing. And the combination of all three helps our students reach this new state of being, develop a new identity, reach a higher level of consciousness, but most importantly, find their sense of purpose and belonging in the world. So I found all kinds of teams working on it, really interesting challenges. And the one question I always get is, what are the most important skill sets? So when I think of skill sets, I go back to the foundational skills of teamwork and communication. And then I love the World Economic Forum 2020 skill sets, things like complex problem solving and critical thinking and creativity and negotiation and emotional intelligence. So whether you are an engineer or a business major or a liberal arts major or a humanist, these are skills that you should be developing. When we think of mindsets, these are things like a creative inquiry led approach, design thinking, an evidence based approach, a data driven approach, your ability to envision the future, your ability to make good, sound, ethical decisions, your ability to take the lead, play by strengths, and get stuff done. The execution, get stuff done, is probably one of the most important ones because the difference between doing something 99% and 100% is not 1%. Something is done or something is not done. That's a mindset issue. And the idea here is that if you have the right mindset, you can develop whatever skills you need to be successful. And finally, these skill sets and mindsets come to life through all kinds of experiences in research and entrepreneurship and community engagement and teamwork and leadership and what have you, and contribute to clear outcomes in terms of personal growth, in terms of professional recognition, advancing knowledge, and advancing praxis. So we want our students to develop this balance of skill sets, mindsets, and portfolios. And the mindsets drive the skill sets and prepare students to lead lives of impact. So on that note, let's move to the second topic, which is about creative inquiry. What is creative inquiry? In very simple words, I would say that creative inquiry is about pursuing new intellectual, creative, and artistic pathways. It's about asking good questions and trying to find answers to those questions. It's about iterative learning and learning how to ask better questions until you find some solutions, until you create something. What are we trying to create here? So here's the word cloud that emerged out of a study that my team did a couple of years back. It was an informal study, and we went around campus and we asked people, what does innovation mean to you? Given whatever your field is, if you were creating something, what is it that you would create? And here are some of the answers we got. Of course, as a university, you create new knowledge. That's what we are known for. But then there were people who talked about, for us, it's all about creating new technology products, creating new relationships, creating new social movements and business models and drug delivery systems and works of art and poems and new philosophies, new organizations, new documentaries, new religions. We want our students to create stuff. And this is grounded. This is very well grounded in the theory. Some of you, the educators in the room, I'm sure are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. And if you're not, well, you better be. You should go look up Bloom's taxonomy. And the basic idea here is that at the base of this pyramid, you have the focus of education is on remembering stuff, on recalling facts and basic concepts. So when students are regurgitating stuff in exams, essentially it's about remembering much more than it is about understanding or applying or creating or analyzing or evaluating or creating. We want our students to create stuff because when you create stuff, you cannot create stuff if you don't understand how something works. You have to stand on the shoulders of giants. You have to build on what's known before and then push the boundaries. So creative inquiry is fundamentally about pursuing new intellectual pathways. It's about creating stuff. How do we get our students to create stuff? Is it by having them take more courses and take more exams? Probably not. Is it about engaging our students in meaningless problems? A beautiful example of that is right here, the Rube Goldberg system. How many of you are familiar with Rube Goldberg machines here? I wish this was all in person and I could see all of you and ask this question. And it's a great way to spend an afternoon or a weekend. But I look at that and I say, what a colossal waste of time. Why are we taking simple problems and coming up with complex solutions when we should be doing the exact opposite? Because right now, we're in a very, very special moment in history where we have all kinds of global challenges with so many local manifestations. We have the age-old challenges of poverty, ignorance, addiction, violence, tyranny, poor health. And then we have a new and unprecedented challenges that we've never faced before, like cyber warfare, like climate change and the environmental crisis, the threat of nuclear and chemical warfare. If you look at the numbers on life expectancy and literacy and infant mortality from the 1800s, and you look at the current numbers, you will see how you've gone from almost 10% to 90%. We've addressed a lot of these challenges, and time again, there are 4 skills that have really helped us address these challenges. It's about empathy, creativity, communication, and collaboration. Those of you that do a lot of reading would, I assume, are familiar with this idea of a post-work world, and the idea that with advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning, we probably won't have to do a lot of the work that we used to do in the past because those tasks could be automated. I think that is absolutely true. That is happening. But the good thing here is that humans are so good at empathy, creativity, communication, and collaboration, and machines are not there yet. So these skills are going to serve us well, at least for the near future. So, how do you develop these skills? How do you develop all those mindsets? From our perspective, from my soapbox, it's all about engaging students in real, meaningful, authentic projects. And we do that through about 8 to 10 different programs that are offered through my office at Lehigh University. You can go to creativeinquiry.lehigh.edu and check it out. But the basic idea behind all these programs that come together in the summer through the summer experience is that they are focused on pursuing new intellectual pathways. They're all interdisciplinary in nature, so we are not interested in little advances in a certain field. We want students and faculty from different disciplines, different cultures to come together and find that intersection where innovation is most likely to happen. It's about community. It's about a commitment to impact. It's about taking what happens at mountaintop, taking what happens at the university outside the university and into the big good world. So what happens at Lehigh should not stay at Lehigh. Life is short for that. And it's about continuity because to solve some of the most complex problems we face today, we need continuity. We need time. We are going to fail over and over again, and we have to learn from those failures to ultimately find good solutions. And that iterative process just requires time. So we don't work on projects that are a semester long or a year long. We work on 3 to 5, 7 year long projects with one team passing the baton on to the next team until they have a spectacular failure or a spectacular success. So what do these teams look like and what do they do? Going to give you a few real quick snapshots. If you go to our website, you have a long list of our current projects. We have more than 40 projects that our students will be working on in the fall semester and beyond. We'll have about 250 to 300 students that will be working on all these different projects that come from all over the university. So here's a team we had last year that figured out how to 3D print concrete. And that's a game changer because if you can 3D print concrete, you can make your bridges and buildings significantly more efficient, less polluting, and incredibly beautiful. So this team actually developed this technology, and now they're working with various industry partners to commercialize it. We have a team that is working on fighting malnutrition in Sierra Leone and West Africa because 40% of the kids are malnourished and stunted. And so we're looking at the local food, local produce that can be converted into shelf-stable food products that are appetizing, that are aspirational, and that people would be willing to eat. We have a team that worked on mushroom production systems in Cambodia over a 3 year period with a nonprofit called World Hope International, and they successfully commercialized these low-cost mushroom production systems. And now we have 250 farmers that produce about 6,000 kilos of straw mushrooms on a monthly basis, which is an absolute game changer. If you go to Phnom Penh, not very far from where you are in the Philippines, and you order something with straw mushrooms, there's a 1 in 2 chance that those straw mushrooms come from our farmers. And those systems were designed and we helped build them. And all that work was done by undergraduate students at Lehigh and earlier at Penn State. So we have a team that is working on social justice theater that is focused on educating people about mass incarceration, which is a huge problem in the U.S. We have a team that is working on a diagnostic device, a $2 diagnostic device to screen people for sickle cell trait. 24% of the people in West Africa have sickle cell trait. They don't know that. And 90% of the kids under the age of 5 that have sickle cell trait die. And so here's a $2 test that can be used to screen and diagnose the kids. And then there are treatment mechanisms that are available to do it. and we're actually getting pretty close to clinical trials for this new technology. We have a team that is working on virtual reality tours for the Lehigh Valley watershed. So if you're in middle school and you're not fit to go out, or you can't afford to go out to the watershed for a tour, or you're in the middle of a pandemic and you're not allowed to go out on a field trip, you could take a virtual reality tour and learn more about how the watershed works. That's the basic idea. This is our team in the Philippines. This is on the UPD campus. We've been working very closely with Professor Jilmana Pat and her students, and Tito de la Peña and Natalie Versailles Africa, and some brilliant students from the university on plastics upcycling machinery. We have teams that are working on $500 parklets that occupy a single parking spot, and they can be used to extend the restaurant, but more importantly, make the city more livable, more fun. We have a team that's working on a documentary on safe motherhood. Sierra Leone has the highest maternal mortality rate in the world, and so this team is trying to capture the human aspect of what it's like to be a mother, what challenges do pregnant women face, what challenges do new mothers face, what are some of the brilliant things happening in the country that are addressing some of these challenges. So we're not there to criticize, we are there to celebrate some of the beautiful things that are happening in Sierra Leone. And this will end up as a full-length documentary to garner the resources to help reduce the maternal mortality rate. Here's another team that is addressing the same challenge from a very different perspective. They have developed a 2-cent test strip to screen women for urinary tract infections and preeclampsia, which are two major contributors to the high maternal mortality rates. So they actually developed this technology in our labs. They were able to get regulatory approval for this technology, and they actually went out to Sierra Leone and they successfully hired an employee, and they have trained people in a catchment area. They've trained health workers in several districts with a catchment area of about 500,000 people, with the goal of getting to 3 million people over the next year, and the entire country over a 3-year period. So this is an absolute game changer. And if I may delve just a little bit into this, this is an important point. This team that developed this women did not develop the trip. They also developed the entire process, the entire backend on how to get these test strips out to the people. And that includes appropriate education regimens for health workers, for doctors, for nurses, for community health workers in rural areas. It's about collecting good quality data and monitoring it so that we can keep raising the funds we need to support and grow the venture. So they actually developed more than 37 different things to make this venture sustainable. They did not design a product, they designed an entire system that works together to address this challenge. So what's the point? Across all the ventures, the 40 plus ventures we are working on right now, and some of them are on the research side, right? So we have a team that is trying to understand the relationship between creativity and anxiety at the genetic level. They're not going to develop a product. Well, there might be a product that emerges out of it, but that's 10 years away. Right now, it's about discovery. It's about new knowledge. But no matter what the project is, it's not just about one little thing. It's about the entire system, because that's what you need. That's what you need to have impact. So on that note, let me get to my last section, which is really about very practical things. It's about how do you, as a student, as a professor, as just a community member, as a good citizen, as a parent, what are the kinds of things that you should be thinking about when you think about creative inquiry, asking good questions, and traversing that journey from creative inquiry to sustainable impact? So there are 10 hallmarks, and I'm going to just go over them very quickly. The first, probably the most important thing from my perspective, is that life is too short for academic exercises. I was asked earlier by Ken that why do I do what I do? And I said, when I was in school and when I was at the university and I was given homework, and I would ask the teacher or the professor, do you know the answer to these questions? And the answer was, of course, we know the questions are the answers. We are the teachers, so we know the answers, but you have to do it. And that's your homework. And I never did my homework because I said, if you already know the answer, Why should I waste my time trying to find the answer? The point is very simple. Life's too short for academic exercises. Instead of learning what we already know and relearning it over and over again, let's ask questions to which we don't have solutions. Let's dream big and let's focus on those truly new intellectual, artistic, and creative pathways that might advance the world forward. So let's keep it real, let's keep it relevant, let's keep it authentic. So when we talk about real world projects, reality is a binary. Something is real or something is not real. Something is an academic exercise or something is truly open ended where we don't know the answers, but we better find the answers. That makes learning more exciting, more fun, and more meaningful. So keep it real, relevant, and authentic. Two, it's about curiosity, it's about purpose, it's about passion. So when we talk about these projects, we don't say these are student projects or faculty projects. It doesn't matter. These are dreams, these are projects, and students, faculty, external partners, dolphins and whales all come together with that strong sense of purpose and passion, and they take radical ownership. We tell them, make this the purpose of your life. This is all that matters. If you're trying to figure out ways in which we can reduce the maternal mortality rate, because we deep down believe that no woman should die while giving life. That's our value. That's what we believe in. Then we have to do whatever it takes to make that happen, right? If it's just another project we do for 3 hours a week, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get there. So we have to take radical ownership in the project. It's about convergence. So a question I get all the time is, so what kind of majors do you look for? And I say, I don't look for majors. I look for mindsets. If you have the right mindset, you will learn whatever you need to learn to be successful. And we know that the most compelling transformative innovations happen when you have different disciplines, cultures, epistemologies, ways of seeing, thinking, doing, being come together. And so all our teams are fundamentally interdisciplinary, and we have a lot of international students that bring their energy to these teams. Four, it's about playing by strengths. Everybody brings something to that table, and so we leverage positive interdependence. Everybody champions something, and their goal is to help their friends succeed. If your goal is not your success, but all your friends' success, then the entire team is going to succeed. So you always play by strengths. It's about creative freedom. Manage uncertainty. So we're about having the right constraints because they drive creativity, but within those constraints of what we are trying to accomplish. So what's the constraint here? A 2-cent test strip. That 2 cents is a fundamental constraint. But within those 2 cents, you can be as creative as you want, take whatever risk you want to make that work. So we challenge our students and create environments where they are not afraid to fail. And they learn actually how to fail forward and learn from that failure. And that requires a bias for action. So my principle is do first, learn later. Because then you learn why you need to learn something. You balance the thinking with the doing, ideation with execution. So you understand the problem, understand the context, but after that, it's all about action. Action is what matters. If there are thoughts in your head, there are thoughts in your head. They don't advance the project forward. So it's here, it's now, take action and learn along the way. As I said earlier, fail fast, fail often. Learn from failure. Keep iterating, keep pivoting until you are successful. And that's where persistence and personal resilience become really important. And this is really important for students because we see students that through their high school education have been told that they should never fail. They should always succeed at everything. And entering the real world, that is absolutely unrealistic. So we want our students to fail, and we want them to fail now and learn how to fail forward, how to develop that personal resilience, how to develop that grit so that they keep going no matter what. And at the same time, when the data tells you otherwise, pull the plug. 8, it's about creating value every step of the way. So we work on open-ended problems. We don't know where that solution might lead us. Sometimes it leads us to an abyss that we're never able to get out of. Sometimes we actually find good solutions. But no matter what, every step of the way, we think about ways in which we can carve out our knowledge and share it with others. So all our students, for example, in a global social impact fellowship, are expected to have at least one publication by the time they graduate. And that is how they share that knowledge with others who can then build on that knowledge and know what somebody else has failed at. Mind, impact, impact, impact. It's not about activities. It's about outcomes. It's not about ideas. Ideas don't solve problems. Solutions solve problems. And so while it all starts with an idea. We should not be romanticizing ideation too much. We need to balance that ideation with execution. We need to elevate impact and be ready for the blips and adventures along the way. And finally, have fun. Have fun because life is short. And if you're not enjoying what you're doing, if you're not working on the kinds of projects, the kinds of dreams, the kinds of things that you truly deeply care about, why do it? Go find something else that will really help you, help you come alive, help you, find your true ikigai, find your true self, where you're yourself and you're willing to put the absolute best you have got to find that solution. And it's about getting stuff done. So I know that I'm exactly at 30 minutes and I'm going to wrap it up and open it up for questions, comments, and expletives.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, Kanjan. It's really heartwarming to hear those kinds of words that we can have an impact with whatever we want. Even our small steps, our small changes, we can start with creative inquiry. Uh, I am really touched by your talk, especially as someone coming from the academe, that we really can impact change. And personally, I really like the part that our purpose as someone from the academe would be really to foster an environment where students can fail and learn from these failures and provide a mindset that they can move forward on from these failures. Okay. Chen?
Okay, thank you for that. So at this point, we'll be reading out questions sent in by our audience. You may still ask your questions through the Slido link or through the
Yeah.
chat here in StreamYard. So first we have a question from Ma'am Mitzi Marie Aguilar Reyes, the Dean of College of Fine Arts from UP Diliman. Is creative inquiry relative and synonymous to creative thinking?
Wow. Well, first of all, Dean Mitzi, thank you so much for listening to my talk. I'm really honored to have you there. I've heard a lot of good things about you, so thank you. I'm an engineer, and I don't particularly enjoy getting into the semantics of things, but I would say that yes, creative inquiry is about creative thinking, but it is much more than just creative thinking because it involves the process of trying to answer the question. It's a balance between creative thinking and creative doing, and it's about that new intellectual pathway. Thinking will lead you to more thoughts, or thinking will lead you to action. And if that thinking leads you to action, and you actually pursue that action and strive for real impact, I would like that more.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Kanjan. Our second question is from Dan Sweeney from MIT. Good evening, Dan. Creative inquiry sounds time consuming, rigid, and requiring access to experts like you, Professor Mehta. Is there a quick start to good creative inquiry?
That's actually a very good question, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, I am not an expert on anything. So I'll go back to one project I mentioned, which is around mushrooms. I'm an electrical engineer by training, and I've never worked with mushrooms before until I worked on this project. And I personally don't even like mushrooms. But we saw this opportunity, and then it was all about the process, right? My job as the mentor for this team is to guide students through this process where they are asking the right questions, talking to a lot of people, collecting all these different perspectives, bring them together, and saying, what do we do next, and what does success look like? So it's this mix of a little bit of design thinking, a little bit of entrepreneurial thinking, a little bit of systems thinking, a huge bias for action, and access to a network of experts. So our students go out and talk to real mushroom farmers, to mycologists, who study mushrooms at large agricultural universities because we don't have an ag school. So I think that creative inquiry is much more about that process. Is it a quick start to good creative inquiry? It's about being really, really passionate about a problem or a question, and then just going out on this search all out without stopping.
Yeah. So it's all about the mindset, really.
It's
Um,
about
yeah.
I think
So
it's actually a good intro for
keep your
this
questions
next
coming,
question.
Shane.
Yeah. This one is from Christian Arons from UP Diliman. Can the concept of creative inquiry be applied to all fields? How can educators and students apply it in learning?
great question. So, from my obviously biased perspective, I believe that it is relevant to every single field. If a field exists because they are trying to learn more, if they are trying to discover something new, and that's a continual process, which is true for every single field, then obviously creative inquiry is relevant to them. And let's be honest here. In some ways, creative inquiry is also about branding. It's about distinguishing our programs and our students and our university. But faculty and students have been engaged in creative inquiry since time immemorial, right? And in some ways, children are much better at creative inquiry than some of my students are. Like I have a 3-year-old daughter who's always asking questions, all kinds of questions, and trying to find those answers. And she thinks in a much more open-ended manner than some of my students do. So from that perspective, I want my students to be like children, where they go out and ask, build and develop that intrinsic curiosity to ask good questions and find answers. So how can you apply to your learning? Go ask good questions. But I would break away from this emphasis on learning. And you guys can all hate me for saying this, but I am getting increasingly allergic to this narrow focus on learning. I'm tired of learning outcomes. I care more about the outcomes beyond the learning outcomes. I can go to Google and learn about almost anything I want to learn about. What's more important is how do I take that knowledge, combine it with other knowledges and people and concepts and what have you, and create value. So I think our focus should be much more on the outcomes beyond the learning outcomes, in helping students develop their agency and self-efficacy and purpose and belonging, and directly contributing to knowledge and praxis.
I see. So it's really more of a way of life than a strict discipline. I think we have more
Okay.
questions.
Yeah, just keep your questions coming. You can ask questions through the Facebook comments or through our Slido link. Okay, so our next question is, what is the epistemology of creative inquiry, and how does that relate to good or not good inquiry?
Wow.
Epistemology. Wow.
Yeah, a big word. So where does creative inquiry come from? If that's the way I would kind of read that question, what is the episteme? What's the source of creative inquiry? I think I think it emerges from curiosity and passion. And what is good inquiry? What is not good inquiry? Who knows? Who knows? I don't know what's a good question, what's not a good question, but I think that over time we all learn how to ask better questions. And the more you engage in this process, you get better at asking the right questions that will lead you to the right answers. Uh, if I may digress a bit, but not really, there's an organization called the Right Question Institute based in Massachusetts. And I've been pretty impressed with their work. They have something called the question formulation technique, which is a very, very simple way of just learning how to ask better questions, how to prioritize questions. And you can learn this in just 10 minutes. And it actually works incredibly well. So I would refer you to the Right Question Institute and the question formulation technique on how to get better at asking good questions. And there is no such thing as a bad question, or there is no such thing as a not good inquiry.
That question is also from Dan Sweeney. So thank you for that. So we have other questions, Shane?
Okay, let's see. From Miss Jill from UPD, do you have any advice on how we can encourage other people into this paradigm shift from teaching to learning, especially in higher education institutions?
I mean, that's a great question, and in some ways, that's what I get the big bucks for. That's what I do at the university, and I've got a lot of lessons learned. So this could be a longer conversation by itself. But I think, I think this quote is from Buckminster Fuller that you have to create a whole new world to make the previous way of doing something obsolete. So, I mean, I've tried a lot of different approaches, and I have several programs that all work in parallel. Some programs are focused on an incremental change, where we challenge faculty to replace exams in existing courses with open-ended projects. And so we have a faculty fellowship where we have 8 to 10 faculty every year. We are suspending it this year because of the pandemic. We will have 8 to 10 faculty that are taking exams, taking some of the content away and replacing them with open-ended projects. So that's one example. That's at one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, we have these 40 plus teams that get academic credit, 1 to 6 credits a semester, to be completely focused on their projects. And it's all about the project, and the content becomes the context. In which case, we are affecting that paradigm shift. And 3 years back, we had 13 teams. Actually, we started with like 2 or 3 teams, and then we had 13 teams, and now we are up to 40 teams. And we add about 10, 15 teams more every single year. And the vision here is that we'll get to about 100 teams over the next 3 to 5 years, so that every single student has this opportunity to work on these kinds of open-ended challenges. And so that's the paradigm shift. But it's hard work. So doing stuff like this is not easy. And there are several big questions. Are we focusing from teaching to learning? Yes, that's a great idea. But then my big question would be, how do we focus from this boring learning to just go out and do stuff that matters, do stuff that advances the world forward? And if you learn something along the way, good for you. But that's not my goal, right? That's a completely different philosophical approach. And I think I just have to be realistic that culture change takes a long time, and you just have to keep at it and create as many pathways for faculty who are at different points in their thinking, in their careers, and so on. So sorry for the long answer, but I really hope that was.
I think one good follow-up question that's coming from here, we talked about the higher education institutes. Can creative inquiry be applied to, say, high school? And assuming that one works as a preschool teacher, is there a way to do research? So we're going down to from high school to preschool. And how can research be possible for those not directly part of a research group?
So I got a little confused there. So the question is, how do we do this at the high school level?
We can start with, that's a follow-up question with the previous discussion from higher education institutes. How do we apply to high school, and then someone teaching from a preschool environment, how can that person do research? And we'll follow up question later.
Okay, well, let's I mean, before we get to preschool, let's talk about high schools first. And I think high school, if you look at it fundamentally at a bunch of students, and the teacher who is actually more of the lead learner, that is part of the adventure, that is working with the students to learn and create value. That's actually not very difficult, and the process does not look very different than the way we approach things at the university level. But the challenge there is in the larger context of accreditation and expectations and working hours, and that's what it practically comes down to, and that makes it really hard. So I think one approach, and we've been working in Kazakhstan on some projects, and so they have a whole bunch of schools called the Nazarbayev schools, which were set up with this focus on science, technology, innovation. And so if you can start with those schools that have more autonomy to try new things, that would be a good start. I know that Philippines has a significant following for the Montessori schools. And I love Montessori schools, and my kids go to Montessori schools. And I actually think that in many ways, what we do in higher education is very similar to how teachers mentor and coach students at a Montessori school. So I think it's very possible from that preschool level. And it's about the mindset, right? You're developing that mindset for creative inquiry, for failure, for iteration.
Yeah. And a follow-up question, how can research be possible for those not directly part of a research community?
Well, find people in the research community, and they will bring in some kind of methodological expertise and access to subject matter expertise, right? So you can pursue research by yourself, even if you're not part of the research community. But working with faculty, working with students in the research community is definitely a good idea.
Thank you, thank you for that, Khanjan. So we can do research even if we're really not part of anything. So we have to start with doing and asking the right questions and how we can impact the community.
I guess that's just really hard. And this is a question from Kat from UP Diliman also. Is that we've been living and operating in a box for so long. So how can we train ourselves to think outside the box?
I know it's hard, and that's where I think it helps to find people that care about the same problem, the same issue, but look at it from a very different perspective, that come from a different walk of life, come from a different socioeconomic background, that come with different kinds of expertise. And just those conversations will actually help you see how people think about the same problem differently and help you think outside the box. And then it's about iteration, right? If you're trying to find a solution, you have to keep iterating and seeing what works, what doesn't work. And eventually, after talking to enough people, you will find a solution. And frankly, that solution could be inside the box or outside the box. A solution is a solution. It doesn't matter. Whatever works is a solution.
Okay, so we have another question from Jester, UST. He's a senior high school. Is creative inquiry applicable to quantitative and qualitative studies?
Sure. Right, it's about your mindset, right? And those are just methods you use to answer questions. What's more important is that you ask the right questions, find better questions, and try to answer questions. Challenge.
Okay, so I think we have our last question. How can creative inquiry be incorporated or emphasized in the shift to online classes or learning? So in some other cases, we call this remote learning. So how can we incorporate creative inquiry?
Wow, that's a really good question. And that's the creative inquiry that I'm currently engaged in myself. Since we moved to virtual mode mid-March because of the pandemic, we've been trying to figure out how to move all our programs to virtual mode. And we just ended our 10-week summer experience with 225 students working on these 40-some projects. And actually, we learned a lot of things. The first is that students were incredibly productive. Maybe because they had fewer distractions. Maybe they couldn't go out to work. Maybe their social lives were compromised. And so they were incredibly productive in online, in virtual mode. But they had as long as they had a clear sense of purpose and some kind of structure to come together and work as a team. And that's where we saw a lot of challenges with teamwork because some students had good internet access, some did not. So trying to find that level playing field from a technology perspective, from clarity of purpose perspective was a challenge. But ultimately, I feel that moving into virtual mode does not stop creative inquiry happening in a good way. One last thing I would add is that a lot of our work is very collaborative, working with students and faculty and partners in various countries. And we actually found that the level of virtual teaming that was happening, for example, between our teams and teams in Kazakhstan was significantly better because our students realize that they have absolutely no way to get done what they need to get done unless they really start working with their partners in Kazakhstan, right? They were not going to be able to travel there anymore, and so they had to be collaborative, and vice versa. So that led to much better virtual teaming and much stronger outcomes.
Khanjan, is it okay if we ask one more question?
Sure.
Okay, it's a Facebook question. Uh, Formal basic education in the Philippines just got a 2 month reprieve. How do we make the most of that in terms of targeting foundational skills? And what would your advice be to our Ministry of Education? We have that in depth ed.
Wow, man, this one is above my level. I'm not very good at working with the government. No, just kidding. Can you help me understand what you mean by formal basic education got a 2 month reprieve? Right.
Okay, so we actually adjusted our opening of classes. Supposedly we start in June, but now we're starting in August due to the pandemic. Um, and similar to the US, we have a structured high school um, curriculum. So in terms of foundational skills, okay, so how do we make of the most after out of the 2 month period, and what advice could you give to our to our Ministry of Education so we can improve moving forward?
Sure. So during those 2 months, is there any kind of virtual engagement between the teachers and the students?
So far, I
Actually,
think there's none. Yes, yes, Shen. Yeah.
actually, a lot of the efforts of the Department of Education in the Philippines is that they're trying to do modular learning. So they deliver modules to their students, and they leave it to them for a week, and then they collect those modules after 1 week.
So I think if I were in the Ministry of Education and I could influence this, I would try to say replace half those modules that are focused on content, like more math, more calculus, more what have you. I would replace half of them, if not all of them, with open-ended problems. Say let's forget about calculus altogether, but let's think about this particular challenge of environmental degradation. Let's think about traffic in Manila and what are ways in which we can make traffic in Manila better. I don't think that problem is solvable. So let's solve problems like climate change, right? And what can we actually practically do to address one of these problems? So just throw real problems out at them, break them up into teams, and let them get their creative juices to play. Let them learn how to talk to each other. Let them how to articulate their questions better and come up with solutions. I think that will help them more in the longer term than cramming a little more of thermodynamics.
So I think that's enough for the Q&A. But if you have questions, you can still post them. Maybe we can answer later. Okay. But now we'd like to hear uh, from you guys as well. How can we localize these things that we learned? Shen.
Yes, just continue sharing to us through the chat or to the Slido if you have any ideas of how you think we can localize what kind what Prof. Kanjan has shared to us.
Yeah, you can send in your comments. How about you, Shen? What's the most interesting part of the talk that you learned? What you
Well, I
feel
was very
is some
interested in looking at the trends that Kanjan has presented with us, like the rise of the gig economy. And I know that the Philippines, I think, is one of those countries who has a big rise in freelancing in the last years. And I was just really wondering uh, how this affects collaboration because especially now we'll just be in our homes and we'll be separated from our coworkers. And all that. So I think this concept of creative inquiry uh, helps us to still be connected and collaborate well with the people we are working with.
Yeah. Um, for me, what strikes the most, especially during the first part of the presentation, was that what we usually have is a bottom up approach. Okay, so we build this knowledge, and later on we'll look for other application or some applications that we can use this knowledge. And I think from Khanjan, what we really can do is to shift that mindset from a bottom up approach to top to finding an application to a point where we look for a problem and we learn everything we can to understand how we can address or we can solve this problem. So during the Kanjan's discussion, I was thinking um, one of the things that paralyze, uh, one of the things that gets us paralyzed is the idea that if we have this very big problem, poverty, environment, which sometimes tend to just to have this mindset na, oh, I cannot provide a solution for that. But if we have the right mindset and we take the steps, small steps, I think we can move forward, and that's very inspirational for me.
Can I jump in there? Am I allowed to talk?
Yeah. So
Sure, fine.
yeah,
So
yeah, sure, Kanchan.
I really like the way you said it, Ken, because there are a lot of problems in the world. Some are solvable, some are not. Most are not solvable by us. So we have to be very realistic about
Yeah,
what are problems that we can even address, where we can imagine a higher equilibrium, right? So I'd say
yeah,
that we need to think not so much about problems as opportunities. That this is how things work right now, and what is the opportunity to transform the system to a higher level and where it is sustainable. So focusing on opportunities, and if we keep doing this over and over and over again, and when we look back, we realize, wow, we've come such a long way, but step by step by step. So innovation happens in a lot of small incremental steps.
yeah. And what's more important is that we can impact change, we can provide change in our own ways. Okay, so not necessarily with our own field, we can play by our own strengths. There's a comment from Kath. Shen, you can read.
Yeah, okay. Kat said, I think it's like Kanjan said, we need to be more open to connecting and networking with professionals or even with just our friends, to ask questions and be open to more solutions, even if it's not the thing we have in mind. Also, to not be afraid of failure, to fail frequently and to fail forward is something that I had really insightful with this talk.
Yeah. And I think moving forward, everything you said in this morning really, Kanjan, we can we can use this moving forward. Um, Not even in class, but with our own developments as well. Okay. Before we close, do you have any? I think we're closing. We're closing now. Shall we have other comments?
Well, I just want to add to Kat's comment about asking questions even with just our friends and failing forward and failing to achieve something eventually is really something that is not that we're not used to, right? Because we're really just often exposed to theories in the academe, but we often have to wait it out after college and in our works already before we have to apply all these learnings that we've been exposed to in the past years. So the emphasis on creative freedom and the bias for action is something that I really find helpful from this event.
Yeah. Thank you so much again, Kanjan, for your time. And Shen, I think that's really good closing. Okay. So Before we close, do you have any websites or social media accounts that our viewers could follow you to learn more about creative inquiry and impactful projects?
Sure. So I think here are some websites that are being shared by the team, but I did want to say a couple of things very quickly. And that is, first of all, I know how hard um, Chen and Ken and Carlo and Paul and Jill and everybody worked to put this together. So salamat po, salamat po, salamat po. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Thank you for having me. I've been working with Jill and Tito and everybody in the Philippines for the last 5, 6 years, and I come there once or sometimes twice a year. And I love being in the Philippines because I love the culture. I love how open-minded people are and how humble people are, and they're always looking to learn. And there's just incredible amounts of talent in the Philippines. And I'm so happy to see Saliksik come to life because this is exactly the kind of forum, the kind of community you need to elevate research and evidence-based approaches that can help improve quality of life in the Philippines and beyond. So thank you for having me, and I really wish you the best.
Yeah, thank you for those kind words, Khanjan. We hope you had a good time, and I hope everybody in our audience had a good time as well.
Thank you, Kanjan, and of course, thank you to our audience for joining us in this event. We hope to see you again in our future events. We also want to thank Humanitarian Engineering, Entrepreneurship and Design and Make Sense for partnering with us in this event. Aside from SalikSPEAK, we have Saliksik, where we invite a Filipino researcher to share notes on our page for a week and have a live session with them by the end of the week. Follow our Facebook page for more updates and check out our website, saliksik.co, where you can pledge support for Filipino research or even start your own campaign. Again, thank you so much, and let's empower Filipino research together.
Thank you so much, Kanchan, for your time, and we thank everyone as well for this wonderful morning. Good evening there on the other side. Okay,
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.
thank you, and have a great day ahead, everyone.